The phone buzzed against my ear as I stood alone in the warehouse at midnight, checking inventory sheets. Through the static, I heard my wife's voice, breathy, giggling like a teenager. "You're so much better than him, Colt. God, I can't believe I wasted 10 years. My hand froze on the clipboard, and Taryn thought she'd hung up, but the call was still connected to our shared Bluetooth system. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "When are you going to leave that loser?" Colt's voice was smooth, confident. "Maya's been asking questions about my late nights." "Soon," Taryn purred. "Once I figure out how to get the house. Derek's too stupid to see it coming." The line went silent. I stood there in the fluorescent glare, surrounded by towers of cardboard boxes and the smell of diesel fumes from the loading dock. After 10 years of marriage, this was how I found out. By accident, in a warehouse at midnight, listening to my wife plan my destruction. You'd think after a decade together, I'd be the one getting the midnight giggles. I drove home through empty streets, past the 24-hour diner where Taryn and I used to go after fights, past the movie theater where we had our first date. Our house sat dark, except for the porch light, the paint peeling worse than last month. The mortgage was eliminating us, but Taryn insisted we needed to keep up appearances for her sales job. Inside, she was already asleep, or pretending to be. Her phone lay charging on the nightstand, screen down. Always screen down now. I stood in the doorway watching her breathe, this woman who'd shared my bed for a decade while planning to destroy me. The next morning, Taryn bounced around the kitchen in her silk blouse and pencil skirt, humming while she made coffee. She'd been dressing better lately, buying expensive clothes we couldn't afford. "Working late again tonight," she said without looking at me. "Big client presentation?" "Which client?" I asked, spreading peanut butter on toast. "Morrison Industries. You wouldn't know them." She grabbed her purse, kissed my cheek with lips that tasted like expensive lipstick. "Don't wait up." After she left, I opened our phone app and checked the family locator. Her phone showed she was at the office downtown, but something nagged at me. I remembered Colt Rayner from high school, quarterback, rich parents, the kind of guy who never heard no. He'd dated Taryn Jr. year before she chose me. Apparently she was having second thoughts about that decision. I called in sick to work and drove to Colt's neighborhood. His address was easy to find. He'd been tagged in enough social media posts at his downtown bachelor pad. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed money. Taryn's Honda was parked in the visitor's spot. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching the building's entrance. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Presentation running long. Might grab dinner with the team." The team? Right. At 6 p.m., they emerged together. Colt had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward a restaurant across the street. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back in a way she hadn't laughed with me in years. I followed them to Chez Laurent, the fancy French place downtown. Through the window, I watched them share wine and lean across the table like lovers. She touched his hand. He kissed her fingers. My phone buzzed again. "Client dinner running super late. Don't wait up. Love you." Love you. The words felt like acid in my chest. I went home and waited. She stumbled in at midnight, claiming exhaustion from the presentation. Her hair was mussed, her lipstick gone, and she smelled like Colt's cologne, the same stuff he'd worn in high school. "How was Morrison Industries?" I asked from the couch. She froze halfway up the stairs. "Fine. Boring. You know how these things are." "No," I said quietly. "I really don't." The next few days, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Taryn's phone calls that ended when I entered the room, her sudden interest in yoga classes that weren't on any studio's schedule, the way she'd started criticizing everything about me, my job, my clothes, my laugh. "Derek, you're being paranoid," she said when I asked about her schedule. "I'm working hard to build my career. Someone in this marriage has to have ambition." The dig landed exactly where she intended. I'd been passed over for promotion twice, stuck supervising the same warehouse crew for 3 years, but I was good at my job, respected by the guys, reliable. Apparently, reliable wasn't enough anymore. I decided to do some investigating. Our phones were on the same plan, and I still had access to the account. Late one night, while Taryn showered, I downloaded her text backup. What I found made my stomach turn. Months of messages with Colt, photos I'd never seen, conversations that made my 10-year marriage look like a joke. They'd been planning this for weeks. How to get me out of the house, how to split the assets, how to make it look like I was the problem. But the worst part was the group chat with her work friends. They called it Taryn's Escape Plan. 7 women, all discussing my failures as a husband, how I was holding her back, how Colt was such an upgrade, how I was too stupid to realize what was happening. One message made me see red. Poor Derek thinks we're still happy. It's almost sad how clueless he is. Colt says I should just ghost him, but I want the house. I screenshotted everything. The next evening, Taryn announced another client dinner. This time, I was ready. I'd borrowed my coworker Jake's motorcycle and followed her from a distance. She drove straight to Colt's building. I parked across the street and waited. At 9 p.m., they left together, heading to his Tesla in the garage. I watched him open her door, watched her slide across the leather seat like she belonged there. That's when I snapped. I walked into the garage and found his car. The Tesla was his pride and joy. He'd posted about it constantly on social media. I pulled out my keys and dragged them along the driver's side, spelling out cheater in foot-high letters. Then I took out my pocket knife and put a neat hole in the front tire. On the windshield, I left a note. Hope you enjoyed the ride. Your husband knows. Derek. I was walking back to the motorcycle when a flash went off behind me. Mrs. Chen from our neighborhood stood by the garage entrance with her phone. Derek, what are you doing here? Mrs. Chen was the neighborhood gossip, the kind of woman who knew everyone's business before they did. Just visiting a friend, I said, trying to sound casual. She looked at the keyed Tesla, then back at me. Uh-huh. Well, I should get going. I knew she'd be texting Taryn before I made it home. Sure enough, when I walked in the door, Taryn was pacing the living room with her phone pressed to her ear. I don't care what it costs to fix, she was saying. This is harassment. She saw me and hung up quickly. Where were you? Grabbed a beer with Jake. I kept my voice steady. How was your client dinner? It was fine. Her eyes were wary now, calculating. Mrs. Chen called. She said she saw you downtown. Yeah, Jake and I went to Murphy's Pub. It's downtown. She said you were in a parking garage. I shrugged. Maybe she needs glasses. We stared at each other across the living room. 10 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Lies and accusations and the smell of another man's cologne on my wife's clothes. I'm tired, she said finally. I'm going to bed. You do that? I stayed up until dawn, scrolling through more of her messages. The group chat had exploded after Mrs. Chen's call. Her friends were advising her to be careful and maybe stay somewhere else for a few days. One suggested she call the police for keying a car. My wife was ready to have me arrested for property damage while she planned to steal half my assets and disappear with her high school boyfriend. The next morning, Taryn was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note. Staying at Jennifer's for a few days. We need space to think. Jennifer was her work friend, one of the women in the group chat. I'd met her at company parties. Fake smile, fake laugh, the kind of person who'd stab you in the back while asking about your weekend. I called in sick again and drove to Taryn's office. Her car was in the lot, so she hadn't fled town yet. I parked and waited, watching the building's glass doors. At lunch, she emerged with Colt. He had his arm around her waist, and she was leaning into him like they were already married. They walked to his rental car. Apparently the Tesla was still in the shop. I followed them to a hotel restaurant across town. They had a corner booth, hands intertwined across the table, discussing something intense. Probably their next move in the divorce proceedings. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Boss is looking for you, says you better be fading. I was fading in a way. The life I'd built was crumbling, and my wife was picking through the wreckage with her new boyfriend. I drove back to the warehouse and found my supervisor, Bill, in his office. He was a good guy, former military, the kind of boss who'd cover for you if you were straight with him. Family emergency, I said. My wife's having an affair. Bill looked up from his paperwork. Shit, Derek. I'm sorry. I need a few days to handle the legal stuff. Take what you need. The guys can cover your shifts. That afternoon, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a divorce attorney, a shark named Patricia Voss who'd handled my brother's messy split. The second was to a private investigator. I don't need proof of the affair, I told the PI, a former cop named Ray Morrison. I need leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that makes them both regret they were born. Ray was expensive, but I had savings Taryn didn't know about. Money I'd been setting aside for a down payment on a better house. Now it would buy me revenge. 2 days later, Ray called with a preliminary report. Colt was married, something I'd suspected but couldn't confirm. His wife Maya was a pediatric surgeon, beautiful and successful. She had no idea her husband was cheating. Gets better, Ray said. Colt's been skimming money from his business partnership. Nothing illegal, technically, but his partner would be very interested to know about it. What about Taryn? She's been inflating her expense reports at work. Small amounts, but it adds up. Her boss is a real stickler for ethics. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Send me everything. That evening, I drove to Maya Rayner's hospital. She was finishing her shift, walking to her car in scrubs, looking exhausted. I'd seen her photo on Colt's social media, always perfectly styled, smiling at charity events. In person, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Dr. Rayner? She turned, keys in hand. Yes? My name is Derek Mallon. I think we need to talk about our spouses. Her face went pale. I don't know what you mean. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the photos from Taryn's messages. Colt shirtless in what was clearly a hotel room. Maya stared at the screen for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were blazing. Get in my car, she said. We have work to do. We drove to an all-night diner and spread the evidence across a corner booth. Maya studied every photo, every text message, every detail of their months-long affair. I knew something was wrong, she said finally. The late nights, the business trips that didn't add up. I even hired a PI, but Colt was careful. Not careful enough. She looked at me across the table. What do you want to do about this? I want them to pay, not just lose them. I want them humiliated, destroyed, left with nothing. Maya smiled, and for the first time, I saw the steel beneath her gentle exterior. I like the way you think. We spent the next hour planning. Maya had access to Colt's business accounts, his social media, his professional contacts. I had Taryn's messages, her work information, her network of friends. There's a company party next Friday, Maya said. Rooftop of the Marriott downtown. Colt's business partner will be there, along with most of their clients. Taryn's whole office will be there too. They always attend the Morrison Industries events. Perfect. Maya's smile was sharp as a scalpel. Let's give them a party they'll never forget. The next week crawled by. Taryn stayed at Jennifer's, texting me occasionally about working things out and couples therapy. I played along, agreeing to counseling sessions I had no intention of attending. Meanwhile, Maya and I prepared our assault. She'd gotten copies of Colt's financial records, proof of his embezzlement. I'd compiled a greatest hits collection of Taryn's messages, including the group chat where her friends dissected our marriage like a failed science experiment. Friday evening, I put on my best suit and drove downtown. Maya met me in the hotel lobby, stunning in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Ready? She asked. Let's destroy them. The party was in full swing when we arrived. The rooftop was packed with the city's business elite, champagne flowing, jazz music drifting from hidden speakers. I spotted Taryn immediately. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen, laughing with her work friends by the bar. Colt stood near the windows with his business partner, gesturing expansively as he told some story. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man who'd never faced consequences for anything in his life. That was about to change. Maya approached the DJ booth while I made my way to the projection screen they'd been using for company presentations. The party's organizer, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard, barely glanced at me when I said I had an urgent announcement from Morrison Industries. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ said as the music faded, we have a special presentation this evening. The crowd turned toward the screen as Maya connected her laptop. Taryn looked confused, scanning the room until she spotted me by the projector. Her face went white. Good evening, everyone, I said into the microphone. My name is Derek Mallon, and I have something to share about trust, marriage, and the people we think we know. The first image appeared on the screen, a photo of Taryn and Colt kissing in his apartment, timestamp clearly visible. The crowd murmured, some recognizing the players in this drama. This is my wife Taryn, I continued, my voice steady. And this is Colt Rayner, whose wife Maya is standing right there. Maya waved from the laptop, her smile ice cold. For the past 6 months, they've been having an affair. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is what they said about all of you. The next slide showed screenshots from Taryn's group chat. Messages mocking her coworkers, calling her boss an uptight snake, describing clients as morons with money. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw Taryn's boss, Sandra Morrison, staring at the screen with fury in her eyes. And here's what Colt thinks of his business partners, I said, advancing to the financial records Maya had obtained. Skimming money, inflating expenses, planning to dissolve the partnership and steal the client list. Colt's partner, a thin man named Richards, was already pulling out his phone, probably calling his lawyer. Stop this, Colt shouted, pushing through the crowd toward me. This is harassment. This is truth, I replied. Something you wouldn't recognize if it bit you on your cheating ass. Security was moving toward me now, but Maya stepped in front of the laptop, protecting our presentation. "One more thing," I said quickly. "For those of you wondering how long this has been going on, here's a text from Taryn to her friends. Derek is so pathetic, he actually thinks I love him. I can't wait to take half his stuff and disappear with Colt." The final slide showed their escape plan, bank accounts, asset division, even the fake domestic violence claims Taryn was planning to file. The crowd erupted. People were shouting, taking photos, calling names across the rooftop. Taryn stood frozen by the bar, tears streaming down her face as her coworkers stared at her with disgust. Colt reached the projector and yanked out the cables, but it was too late. The damage was done. Half the party had their phones out, recording everything. "You snake," he snarled, grabbing my shirt. "I'll sue you for everything you have." "With what money?" I asked. "Your business partnership just ended, and your wife's about to take you for everything in the divorce." He swung at me, but I was ready. 10 years of warehouse work had kept me strong, and rage had made me fast. I caught his fist and twisted, sending him stumbling backward into a cocktail table. "Security," someone shouted, but the guards were having trouble reaching us through the chaos. Maya appeared at my elbow. "Time to go," she said calmly. We fought our way to the elevator as the party dissolved into accusations and arguments behind us. In the lobby, Maya handed me a flash drive. "Copies of everything," she said, "in case they try to claim it was all fake." "What happens now?" "Now they face the consequences." She kissed my cheek, a gesture of alliance rather than romance. "Good luck, Derek. You're going to need it." I drove home through the empty streets, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. The house felt different now, not like a home I was losing, but like a prison I was escaping. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Taryn, from her friends, from numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. At midnight, headlights swept across my living room window. Taryn's Honda pulled into the driveway, followed by a car I didn't recognize. She stumbled out, still in her red dress, mascara streaked down her cheeks. The front door flew open without a knock. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed. "You've ruined everything." "I ruined everything?" I stood up from the couch, facing her across the room where we'd shared 10 years of marriage. "I'm not the one who's been sleeping with my high school boyfriend for 6 months." "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she sobbed. "We were going to handle this quietly, maturely." "You mean you were going to rob me blind and disappear?" Jennifer appeared in the doorway behind her, looking nervous. "Maybe we should go back to my place, Taryn." "No!" Taryn whirled on her friend. "This is my house, too. He can't just kick me out." "Actually, I can." I pulled out a folder Patricia Voss had prepared. "Adultery clause in the prenup you signed. Remember that? You get nothing." Her face crumpled. "Derek, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake, but we can fix this." "The only mistake you made was getting caught." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing hysterically. "What am I supposed to do now? Sandra fired me. Everyone saw those messages. My career is over." "You should have thought of that before you decided to destroy our marriage." Jennifer helped her to her feet. "Come on, Taryn, let's get you out of here." As they reached the door, Taryn turned back one last time. "This isn't over, Derek. I'll fight you in court. I'll make you pay for humiliating me." "Good luck with that," I said. "Your lawyer will need to see the evidence first." After they left, I sat in the quiet house and opened a beer. My phone showed dozens of missed calls, hundreds of text messages. The story was already spreading on social media. Videos from the party, screenshots of the evidence, commentary from people who'd witnessed the destruction. I was famous, in a way. The wronged husband who'd fought back. Some of the messages were supportive, others critical. I didn't care about either. What mattered was that Taryn and Colt's world was burning, and I'd lit the match. The next morning brought a knock at the door. I opened it to find 2 police officers, looking official and slightly bored. "Mr. Mallon, we need to ask you some questions about last night's incident at the Marriott Hotel." "What incident would that be, officers?" "Your wife filed a complaint alleging harassment and public humiliation." I invited them in and served coffee while I explained the situation. I showed them the evidence, the photos, the messages, the financial records Maya had provided. "So, you're saying everything you revealed was true?" the older officer asked. "Every word. I have documentation for all of it." "And the assault charge?" He swung at me first. There are probably 50 witnesses and a dozen videos. They left after an hour, satisfied that no crime had been committed. Public embarrassment wasn't illegal, especially when it was based on facts. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Patricia Voss was everything I'd hoped for. Ruthless, thorough, and completely without mercy for cheating spouses. Taryn's lawyer, a public defender she'd been forced to hire after losing her job, was outmatched from the start. "Your client violated the adultery clause," Patricia told him during our first mediation session. "She's entitled to nothing but her personal belongings." "My client disputes the validity of those messages," he replied weakly. Patricia smiled and produced a sworn affidavit from the phone company, confirming the authenticity of every text, every photo, every piece of evidence. Taryn sat beside her lawyer looking hollow, defeated. The confident woman who'd planned my destruction was gone, replaced by someone who'd lost everything in a single evening. "I want the house," she said finally. "You can want whatever you like," Patricia replied. "You're not getting it." The final hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, I had the house to myself and a strange sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Maya called occasionally to update me on Colt's situation. His business partnership had dissolved in a flurry of lawsuits. His wife had filed for divorce and frozen all their joint accounts. He was living in a studio apartment across town, working as a freelance consultant for a fraction of his former income. "He asked about you," Maya said during one of our calls. "Wanted to know if you were satisfied with destroying his life." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were just getting started." She wasn't wrong. I'd been working with Ray Morrison to dig deeper into Colt's business dealings. We'd found evidence of tax evasion, client fraud, and a dozen other schemes that would keep him in legal trouble for years. But my masterpiece was still to come. 2 weeks before the final divorce hearing, I received an invitation to Taryn's birthday party. It was being held at Murphy's Pub, the same place where she'd told her friends I was too pathetic to leave. I almost didn't go. Then I realized this was my chance for the perfect ending. I arrived at Murphy's to find a pathetic gathering, maybe a dozen people, mostly Jennifer and the other women from the group chat. They'd clearly been drinking heavily, their voices loud and slurred. Taryn sat at the center table wearing a cheap dress from Target, a far cry from the designer clothes she used to favor. She looked up as I entered, her face cycling through surprise, anger, and something that might have been hope. "Derek," she said, standing unsteadily, "I didn't think you'd come." Wouldn't miss it for the world. The conversation faded as I approached their table. Jennifer and the others stared at me with undisguised hostility. "What do you want?" Jennifer asked. "Just wanted to wish Taryn a happy birthday." I pulled out an envelope and set it on the table. "Got you a present." Taryn's hands shook as she opened it. Inside were photos, recent surveillance shots of her and Colt together, despite their claims that the affair was over. "Thought your lawyer might be interested," I said, "especially since you're claiming emotional distress and asking for alimony." Her face went white. "You're still having me followed?" "I'm protecting my interests. Amazing what people do when they think no one's watching." Jennifer stood up, swaying slightly. "You're a sick bastard, Derek. She made one mistake, and you've destroyed her entire life." "One mistake?" I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "She planned this for months. She mocked me to my face while stealing money from our joint account. She was ready to file false domestic violence charges to get me arrested." "That's not—" Taryn started. "It's all in the messages, sweetheart. Your lawyer's seen them." The table fell silent. Around us, the bar's regular customers were starting to notice the drama. "What do you want from me?" Taryn asked quietly. "I want you to understand something," I said, leaning down so only she could hear. "You called me pathetic, worthless, a loser who'd never amount to anything. But in the end, I'm the one left standing. Your career is over, your reputation is ruined, and your boyfriend is living in a studio apartment." "Please," she whispered, "can't we just end this?" "It ends when I say it ends." I straightened up and addressed the whole table. "Ladies, enjoy your party. Try not to plan any more affairs. I hear it doesn't work out well." As I turned to leave, Colt walked through the door. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing clothes that had seen better days, the confident swagger completely gone. "You," he said, pointing at me. "This is all your fault." "My fault?" I faced him across the crowded bar. "I didn't make you cheat on your wife. You destroyed everything I worked for. You destroyed it yourself. I just made sure everyone knew about it." He rushed at me, but he was drunk and desperate. I sidestepped easily, and he crashed into a table full of college kids. Beer flew everywhere, chairs scattered, and suddenly the whole bar was shouting. "Fight!" someone yelled, and phones came out to record the action. Colt struggled to his feet, swinging wildly. I caught his wrist and twisted, just like I'd learned in high school wrestling. He went down hard, knocking over another table. "Stay down," I warned him. "You've embarrassed yourself enough." But he kept coming, driven by rage and alcohol and the desperate need to blame someone else for his failures. This time, I didn't hold back. I grabbed him by the shirt and drove him backward into the bar, bottles crashing to the floor behind him. "You want to know why you lost?" I said, my face inches from his. "Because you thought you were better than me. You thought I was too stupid, too weak, too pathetic to fight back, but you were wrong." I released him and he slumped against the bar, blood trickling from his nose. "Every day, for the rest of your life," I continued, "you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that the warehouse supervisor you looked down on destroyed everything you cared about." The bartender was shouting about calling the police, but I was already walking toward the door. Behind me, Taryn was crying again, her birthday party in ruins around her. In the parking lot, I found Maya waiting by my truck. "Heard there was a party," she said with a slight smile. "How did you—" "I've been keeping tabs on our former spouses. Thought you might need backup." "It's over," I said. "They're finished." "Good." She handed me another envelope. "One last present. Colt's been hiding assets in an offshore account. This should ensure he loses everything in our divorce." I looked at this woman who'd become my unlikely ally in revenge. "What happens now?" "Now we move on with our lives. We're free, Derek. Free from their lies, their manipulation, their complete lack of respect for the people who love them." Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "Time to go," Maya said. I climbed into my truck and drove away from Murphy's pub, away from the wreckage of my marriage, away from the woman who'd tried to destroy me and the man who'd helped her. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. Taryn got nothing. No house, no alimony, no assets beyond her personal belongings. The adultery clause held up in court, and Patricia Voss made sure every detail of her infidelity became part of the public record. Colt's situation was even worse. Maya's divorce attorney had found the hidden accounts, the embezzled funds, the tax evasion schemes. He was facing criminal charges and civil lawsuits that would keep him in court for years. I kept the house, the savings, everything we'd built together. But more than that, I kept my dignity. I'd faced betrayal and fought back, not with violence or illegal schemes, but with truth and consequences. 6 months later, I was promoted to warehouse manager. Bill retired and recommended me for his position, saying I'd shown leadership under pressure and the ability to handle complex situations. If only he knew, I still see Taryn occasionally around town. She works at a discount store now, living in a small apartment, driving a 10-year-old car. Sometimes she looks at me with hatred, sometimes with something that might be regret. I feel nothing for her now. Not love, not hate, just the mild interest you'd show a stranger. Colt left town after his trial, owing more in legal fees and restitution than he could pay in a lifetime. Maya heard he was working construction in another state, a far cry from his former life as a successful entrepreneur. Maya and I remained friends, bonded by our shared experience of betrayal and revenge. She rebuilt her life, focusing on her medical career and finding peace in work that actually mattered. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked me once over coffee. "The way we handled everything?" "Never," I said without hesitation. "They made their choices. We just made sure those choices had consequences." As I sit in my house, writing this story, I think about the man I was before that midnight phone call in the warehouse. Trusting, naive, willing to believe the best in people even when the evidence suggested otherwise. That man is gone, replaced by someone harder, more cynical, but ultimately stronger. Someone who learned that sometimes the only way to deal with predators is to become more dangerous than they are. They called me pathetic, worthless, too stupid to see what was happening. They planned to destroy my life and steal everything I'd worked for. But in the end, I was the storm they should have seen coming.